Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be unpacking the totally fascinating and honestly pretty surprising ways our minds handle risk, losses, and making decisions. Okay, let's dive into this with a live test of your very own decision-making process. I really want you to actively participate here, okay? We're going to look at a classic pair of decisions straight from the history of prospect theory, formulated by the legendary Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. So get ready. You're going to have to make a choice.
Let's examine Decision 1. You've got to choose between option A, which is just a guaranteed sure-thing gain of $240. Or you can take option B. Now B is a gamble. It's a 25% chance to gain $1,000, but a 75% chance you get absolutely nothing. Go ahead, mentally lock in your choice. Got it? Well, if you're like most people, your automatic instinctual brain, what Kahneman calls System 1, is immediately drawn to the sure thing. It looks at that guaranteed $240 and just says, yep, I'll take that, because it desperately wants to avoid the risk of walking away empty-handed. All right, now let's immediately move to Decision 2. Option C is a sure guaranteed loss of $750. Ouch. But option D is a gamble, a 75% chance you're going to lose $1,000 and a 25% chance you lose nothing at all. Make your choice. Did you pick D? Because right here, in the domain of losses, our brains suddenly switch gears entirely. We become total risk seekers. The emotional pain, that aversion to taking a guaranteed loss, is just so overwhelmingly strong that we willingly take a super risky gamble, just hoping for that small 25% chance of escaping without losing a dime.
So let's see how you did. If you picked option A for the first decision and option D for the second, well, you're in the vast majority. In Kahneman's original experiment, a massive 73% of people chose exactly that combination, A and D. But here is the trap, and it's a huge one. When you made these choices, you naturally looked at them as two completely separate problems, right? You probably didn't sit there and compute the mathematical combinations of the two decisions together. Actually, only a tiny 3% of people favored the combination of the two rejected options, B and C.
And this right here is where the illusion of our own rationality completely shatters, because if you sit down and do the math, combining the two options almost everyone rejected, options B and C, actually unequivocally dominates the popular choice of A and D. Like option BC is mathematically superior in literally every way. This simple test exposes our so-called logical consistency for exactly what it is, a hopeless mirage. We so easily chop up simple choices into combinations that lead us right into making completely inconsistent, totally inferior decisions. So, how did almost all of us so confidently march into a mathematically wrong choice? Section 1. Narrow versus broad framing. To really understand the hidden psychological forces messing with us here, we need to look at the difference between narrow and broad framing. Narrow framing is when we look at a sequence of simple decisions and consider them completely separately. And hey, that's exactly what you just did with decisions 1 and 2. Broad framing, on the flip side, is treating it as a single comprehensive decision with all 4 combined options. Here's the absolute crucial takeaway. Humans are, by our very nature, narrow framers. We just process problems as they pop up because, honestly, it takes way less mental effort. But the thing is, broad framing is almost always mathematically superior.
And being a natural, narrow framer, it's incredibly expensive over a lifetime. Because we treat gains and losses separately, our gut instincts make us willing to pay a premium just to get a sure gain, while at the exact same time we're paying another premium to avoid a sure loss. The real tragedy here? Both of those payments are coming out of the exact same pocket. When you face both kinds of problems at the same time, treating them as isolated little incidents leads to highly suboptimal outcomes.
Section 2. Samuelson's coin toss problem. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it perfectly captures this exact flaw in action. Paul Samuelson, who is an absolute giant of 20th century economics, posed this fascinating scenario to a friend. He offered his friend a coin toss where he could either lose $100 or win $200. His friend flat out declined, and he said, "I won't bet because I would feel the $100 loss more than the $200 gain, but I'll take you on if you promise to let me make 100 such bets." I mean, wow. This is a stunning display of cognitive dissonance. It just perfectly highlights how crazy it is to reject one highly favorable gamble, yet enthusiastically demand 100 of those exact same gambles.
Section 3. The magic of aggregation.
So Samuelson's friend basically gave us the perfect articulation of loss aversion, this reality that the pain of losing feels about twice as intense as the joy of winning. Let's break down the exact math of that single coin toss. You have a 50% chance to win $200 and a 50% chance to lose $100. Mathematically speaking, the expected value of this single toss is positive $50. But remember, a loss-averse person feels losses twice as heavily. So in their head, that potential $100 loss feels exactly like a $200 loss, which perfectly cancels out the joy of the $200 gain. Subjectively, to a loss-averse brain, this highly favorable $50 bet is valued at a flat zero. And this brilliantly illustrates the solution. We already know that one toss has a subjective value of 0 to us. But look what happens when we just bundle two tosses together. The extreme outcomes, like losing twice or winning twice, they basically cancel each other out in subjective value. But that middle outcome, one win and one loss, is mathematically positive. So suddenly, two supposedly worthless bets, when combined, are worth $50. Bundle three tosses, and the subjective value jumps to $112.50. The risk of overall loss dramatically shrinks, and the value skyrockets. This right here, this is the absolute magic of aggregating gambles.
Section 4. Thinking like a trader.
Okay, seeing the math on a chart is one thing, but how do we actually implement this? How do we overcome our deep-seated biological fear of small losses? To do that, we have to transition from just mathematical theory to real-world application. Kahneman offers this fantastic reality check for anyone agonizing over a small, favorable gamble. Just ask yourself, are you on your deathbed? Is this literally the last offer of a small, favorable gamble that you will ever consider? The answer is obviously no. You are going to have countless opportunities to make small financial choices throughout your life. Viewing every single one as a life-or-death, isolated event, well, that's exactly what triggers your loss aversion.
To combat this, experienced traders use a super simple, yet incredibly effective, broad framing tool. Rehearse the mantra, you win a few, you lose a few. I know, it sounds like a total cliche, but its main purpose is highly strategic. It's actually designed to control your emotional and physical response when a small loss inevitably happens. In lab experiments, subjects who were taught to use this broad framing actually showed blunted physiological reactions to losses. Like they measured it through skin conductance. It literally calms your nervous system down.
Now, quick caveat, we have to be smart about this. The win a few, lose a few strategy is absolutely not a license for reckless gambling. There are very strict qualifications. First, the risks must be genuinely independent, meaning don't make 10 investments in the exact same failing industry. Second, a potential loss absolutely cannot ruin your total wealth. We are strictly talking about small risks relative to your portfolio. And third, this math totally falls apart for extreme long shots, like lottery tickets, where the probability of winning is just microscopic.
Section 5. Adopting a risk policy. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual strategy we can use. So we can actually formalize this whole broad framing logic into what's called a risk policy. A risk policy basically embeds a particular risky choice into a broader set of similar choices. It shifts your focus away from the agonizing tiny specifics of one situation and moves it to the statistical probability of long-term success. A perfect example of a personal risk policy is just how often you check your investment portfolio. If you check your stocks daily, you are subjecting yourself to frequent small pains because the market dips literally all the time. And those small losses hurt way more than the gains feel good. But by adopting a policy to only check quarterly, you receive aggregated feedback, you save yourself the emotional agony, you reduce your loss aversion, and crucially, you stop yourself from uselessly churning your portfolio in a total panic.
And you know, this applies to massive organizations too. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler once asked 25 managers of a huge company if they'd take a gamble with a 50-50 chance to either lose a chunk of their capital or double it. Because they were narrow framing and loss-averse about their own specific departments, literally every single one of them said no. But the CEO, who was looking at the broad frame across all 25 divisions, simply said, I would like all of them to accept their risks. That CEO knew that aggregating 25 favorable bets across the whole company virtually guaranteed a massive overall profit.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The combination of loss aversion and narrow framing is a very, very costly curse, but it's one you now have the tools to break. So I'll leave you with this. Will you treat your next financial choice as an isolated, stressful event or as one small, aggregated part of your entire lifetime portfolio? The next time you face a small risk with a positive expected value, just remember to zoom out, embrace the absolute magic of the broad frame, and remind yourself, you win a few, you lose a few,